Section 34.3 deals with muscles, and we're going to talk about muscles. In this section, we're going to first talk about the 3 types of muscles. Then we're going to talk about how muscles work. We're going to talk about what happens to the muscles during the process of exercise. You go to the gym, you work out. What happens to the muscles? We're going to talk about that. There are 3 types of muscles. Number 1, we have smooth muscle. Smooth muscles, and these are found in the walls of internal organs. For example, the organs of your digestive tract and the blood vessels. These are the stuff inside of you, lining your organs. You have your stomach. Does your stomach contract? Yeah. Yes, it contracts, right? It has muscles. It is smooth muscle. Okay, so smooth muscle. What's the first type? Smooth muscle. Now, this is also called involuntary muscle because it's not under conscious control. You don't think and say, you know what, I want my stomach to contract right now and digest the food. It just happens. And that is why we call it involuntary. Actually, the heart would be slightly different, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Okay, the second type of muscle would be cardiac muscle. Where do you find that one? That one you find in the heart. And this is very different from the other muscles, the other types of muscles. Number 1, it's found only in the heart. And number 2, and this is the important part, they are interconnected to form a network to help muscle cells contract efficiently. If you stimulate one muscle cell, that stimulation will travel from that one muscle cell to all of the cardiac muscle cells, and the entire thing will contract. Yes, it sends an electrical impulse, and the entire thing will contract. If you dissect a heart, a frog, for example, or a turtle, or whatever you dissect, and you have the heart, and let's say that the turtle is still alive, or whatever the case might be. All right, if you just take a little needle or something of that sort, and you just scrape one area of the muscle cells, one area of the heart, lightly, you'll see the entire thing contract. You're stimulating a few cells, and that spreads to all the rest of the cells, and the entire thing will contract. Okay, because they're electrically connected. Not only that, cardiac muscle cells are adapted to generate and conduct electrical impulse. The heart can beat on its own. The heart does not need any outside stimulation because there are some muscle cells inside the heart that generate a signal, an electrical signal. And you call that the pacemaker cells. Okay? So you have a pacemaker inside of your heart that's generating its signals, and those signals, because all of the cells are electrically connected, they spread from one to the others and to all of the other cells that are connected. Question?
Is that why they use when they revive the person, they use that electrical impulse?
Exactly. Okay, because if something goes wrong where that electrical impulse is not being produced anymore, you can artificially force it you can artificially stimulate it and cause it to start contracting again. And once it starts contracting, the hope is that it will start generating those impulses again on its own. So the heart stops beating, you apply that electrical stimulation, a strong electrical shock, and that can cause it to start beating. And once it starts again, it can continue doing it on its own. Question? Does the little shocky thingy hurt? Well, usually you're in a hospital and you've been through a lot, and that's not the thing that you're feeling. You're not necessarily thinking about that. But once your heart starts back beating, then you can start feeling again. And it's to the point where you're almost dead. Okay, and this is the only way to get you back so that your heart can start beating and you can start functioning normally again. Okay? All right, so smooth muscle, number 1. Second one was what? Cardiac muscle. And the last type is what we usually think about when we think about muscles, skeletal muscle. And skeletal muscle is the one that attaches to and moves bones. I want to move from here to over here. How do I do that? Well, I contract the skeletal muscle that connects to my legs, and I am able to move. Okay? I want to move my hands. I'm contracting my biceps, my triceps, and I can move my arms and all that good stuff. Now, this is also called voluntary muscle because this is the one that is under conscious control. If I want to walk from here to there, I tell my legs, okay, do what you got to do. And it does what it has to do. And I can walk from here to here. Now, the majority of skeletal muscles work in opposing pairs. What is this muscle here called? This muscle group is called biceps, and these are triceps. If I want to take my arm and raise it up, what am I going to do? I'm doing what? I'm going to contract my biceps, and what am I going to do with my triceps? I'm just going to relax it, right? Okay, so these are relaxing, these are contracting, and I can move my arm up. What if I want to do the opposite motion? What am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to contract my triceps, and what happens to my biceps? I'm going to relax that. And now I can move my hand back. Okay, now do you want a situation where both the biceps and triceps are contracting? What are you accomplishing by doing that? Nothing, right? So you wanna be able to regulate that and regulate it well. I mean, and muscles can be really strong. For example, you have a bunch of muscles in your back, and those muscles are really strong, but they're not contracting all the time. Some of them are contracted, some of them are relaxed. Now, if I were to cause all of them to contract, I could have a serious problem. Anyone ever heard of strychnine? Yes. What is it? Like when muscles contract. Okay, it has to do with that. There's a poison that if you inject it into the muscle, what that's going to do is it's going to stop all the inhibition so everything is stimulated. And I've seen examples, I've seen in textbooks and on the internet pictures of a guy where he got strychnine injected into his back or something of the sort, and the muscles in his back contracted so much, okay, that the back of his head was touching the back of his ankles. That's a significant problem. That shows you how strong and powerful those muscles are. Broke his back, broke a lot of stuff, and the back of his head touching the back of his ankles.
Well, why didn't he?
Actually, I'll find that, and I'll show it to you guys. Remind me to show that to you guys next class period. If you take a frog,
Why did he inject it?
I don't know exactly what the story was, but I just remember seeing the picture as an example of what happens with strychnine. Now, if you take a frog, for example, and you inject it with strychnine,
That's so mean.
I'm just telling you what would happen. If you take a frog and inject it with strychnine, I'm not recommending for you to do it, and you just look at that frog and you blow a little bit of wind on that frog, you can literally hold the frog by its toes, by its limbs, and the entire frog will be stretched out straight just like that. Wow. Because of all the muscles that are contracting and keeping it straight out. And it would be really hard to get it to relax. But that just shows you the power of the muscles. Okay, and the power of regulating the muscles. We're going to talk some more about that when we get into the nervous system and how that works. But I just wanted to kind of give you guys an introduction to that. All right, let's continue. That is skeletal muscle that we're talking about. Now, muscle tissue is made up of very long muscle fibers, muscle cells. These are long fused muscle cells, and we're going to look at a diagram that shows this in a little while. Each fiber is made up of myofibrils. Okay, and there are two types of myofibrils. These are basically small fibers. The first type would be the thick filament, myosin. And then we have, what do you think we call the other one? The thin filament, and that's called actin. So we have the thick filament, myosin, the thin filament, actin. And we're going to see how they work together so that we can get this muscle contraction. And this appears striated. In other words, when you look at muscle cells, I never showed you guys Watson over here. But that's Sherlock Bones, and this is Watson. This is the muscle guy. Let me bring him up here. All right. Because he's celebrating Christmas still. His face is falling off, I know, but he'll his head fell off just now. I'm sorry. Let me put him back together. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to take his head off. Okay, so here we have Mr. Watson. Let me turn on the light. Okay, so we have the Mr. Watson here, and you can see the muscle, and it looks striated. Okay, so you see all these stripes and so on. These are made up of individual muscle fibers, and because of that, they have that striated look, that striped look. Let's look at this. Here we have a guy that's running, and we're going to dissect him while he's running. Hopefully it doesn't hurt too much. We've anesthetized him very well by taking a picture so he doesn't feel it. But he's still running in place. He's not moving. He's just frozen in time, just like this. All right. So here we see we have the bone. We have the muscles that attach to the bone. Now we said bone attaches to bone with what? Ligaments. Muscle attached to bone, how? Tendons. All right. It's right here on the screen, so you can see that. All right. So the muscle is attached via tendons. Now if we were to take the muscle, we'll see that it's made up of these fascicles. And each fascicle has a bunch of muscle fibers. What we're going to do is we're going to take this fiber and we're going to enlarge it here. And this is one muscle cell. Okay, so we have the muscle made up of these fascicles with these fibers, and the fibers are the muscle cells. If we were to look at the fiber, we can see that we have myofibrils. So we're going even in more detail. And from right here to right here, we call a sarcomere. What would we call it? Sarcomere. And this is a very important part, and this is what we're going to talk about in terms of how muscle contraction happens. If you were to look at the sarcomere, you'll see that we have thick fibers and thin fibers, thin filaments and thick filaments, and we're going to talk about how that works. The thick one we said is the myosin, and the thin one would be the actin. And we can look at it in more detail. We're not going to go into all this detail, but this is just to give you an idea. You take a muscle, you break it down, you have these fascicles, you break that down, you have the muscle fibers or the muscle cells that have these myofibrils, and here we have one sarcomere. Now we have many sarcomeres all along the muscle fiber, all along the myofibril, and we're going to talk about how that works. This next statement is very important, and I can almost guarantee you that there will be a question about this on the test. The sarcomeres, those are the functional unit of contraction. This is where contraction happens. Those individual little sarcomeres, this is where it all happens. This is how you're able to contract your muscles and all that good stuff. Muscles are going to contract according to the sliding filament theory, and we're going to explain that and how that works. The myosin heads pull against the actin filaments, and actin filaments slide towards one another. If this sounds a little confusing, don't worry. We're going to we're going to see a diagram that illustrates it so that you can understand how that works. When that happens, that causes the sarcomeres to shorten, and this is contraction happening. Now, let's look at a sarcomere. So the diagram that we had before, I'm going to take out one sarcomere, and here we're looking at that sarcomere from this point here to that point there. Right here we have the thick filament, myosin, and here we have the thin filament. What is that one called? Actin. Actin and myosin. And on the myosin, we have these little things that look like little heads. Now, what happens when it's time for contraction to happen? These heads come up and attach to the actin, and they kind of pull the actin. Okay, so this head come up, pulls it a little, that head comes up and pulls it a little. So what is going to happen to this entire section? It's going to come together, right? It's going to become shorter. And that's basically what happens. I'm telling my muscles to contract. All those sarcomeres that are all along the length of the myofibrils, those are going to shorten, and as those shorten, it's going to pull against the bone, and my arm is going to move up. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yes. Okay, you guys aren't just saying that to make me feel good about myself, are you? No. Okay, you don't want me to feel good about myself? No? No? That's terrible. Yes? Good answer. You get an A in my class. In my heart. I'm sorry, I had to do that. That's what I do as a teacher. All right, so here we have a sarcomere. The heads are coming up. It's pulling against it. And we have the sarcomere shortening. And that is contraction happening. Now let's talk about what happens during exercise. You go to the gym, you're working out, you're running, you're lifting weights, whatever it is you might be doing. First thing I want to point out, this might be disappointing to some of you, but the number of muscle cells are fixed at the time of birth. You don't get more muscle cells or anything of that sort. What you were born with is the number of muscle cells you will have for the rest of your life. Okay? So working out makes you stronger, but it does not give you more muscles. I'm sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you will not get any more muscles than you have right now. Okay? But what happens instead? What happens to the muscle cells? Okay, they get bigger. Okay. Basically what happens, the muscle fibers increase in diameter, so it gets thicker in response to regular exercise. Okay, so that's still good. All right, you work out, you're exercising regularly, those muscle cells can actually get thicker in response. Now, muscle contraction requires ATP. Very important. And this is something else I want you to add in right there on that slide before you turn the page. It also requires, what is the other thing it requires? Calcium. Okay? It requires ATP, and it also requires calcium. Very important. If you don't have those two, the muscles can't contract. Now, during exercise, muscles are going to use oxygen. Okay, you go to the gym, you start exercising, you start working out, the muscle cells are using oxygen, the circulatory system is sending blood, the blood is bringing oxygen and the nutrients that you need. This is called aerobic respiration. This eventually shifts to anaerobic respiration when the oxygen is used up and lactic acid is produced. Now, when we spoke about cellular respiration, we spoke about two types of fermentation. What were they? Number one, lactic acid and alcoholic fermentation. Which one did the yeast do in the experiment that we did? Alcoholic fermentation. And which one do we do? Lactic acid. So you're doing anaerobic respiration. This is going to produce lactic acid. Lactic acid builds up, and then as you catch your breath, more oxygen is delivered, and the lactic acid is then broken down. Now, if you exercise regularly, this will result in improved performance of muscles. Not only improved performance of muscles, but the circulatory system is able to send the blood supply that it needs much more efficiently than it could have done if you don't exercise regularly. But as you exercise more regularly, it leads to improved performance of your muscles, improved performance of your circulatory system, all that good stuff, and you start being more efficient at what you're doing. So the take-home message is exercise regularly. If you want to be fit, you want to be in shape, you got to do some exercise. In review, this is 34.3, and what we've looked at, we've spoken about the three types of muscles. What are they? Number one, smooth. Two, and skeletal muscle. Then we spoke about how muscles work. We spoke about the sarcomeres and the actin and myosin and how that leads to contraction. And we spoke about what happens to the muscles during the process of exercise. That is the end of section 3.